Well, look at that, Mr. Doctor's portal made in Blender. Start with the first step. So let's add a mesh plane into our scene. Why we are not using a curved circle? So the reason is, once we divide our panel from right top here and switch this to geometry node editor, while selecting the plane, I will click on this new. Now we have our original plane inside here. We can get rid of that by pressing X key. Now I'm gonna add a curved circle and then connect it back to the geometry output. Now the reason that I'm using this curved circle is that we'll get more control over our curved circle inside of the geometry node, like changing the radius and the resolution. Now before going ahead, I will rotate it on x-axis by 90 degree and then add a plane so that we can have a kind of look at how our portal is gonna look like. I'm also gonna move it a little bit up. So for the starter, I'm gonna change the resolution to around 50 for now. Now, as you have seen in the animation of the actual Dr. Mr. Strange, the portal kind of starts with a single point and then turns into a whole circular line. So how can we achieve that in Blender? That is really simple, using a node which is called trim curve. And if you drop it in, you can see with the end point, you can change around with the trimming of the curved circle. So we have to keyframe it properly. So I will go to the first frame, make sure it is all the way to the 0. Now I will insert a keyframe. Now I will go to the 60th frame right there, then increase the value to all the way 1 so that it becomes a whole circle, and press I to insert a keyframe again. Go back to 0 frame and try to play it. You will see this kind of animation. Now the next thing is, it is only trimming, but the actual circle was rotating as well. You can use a transform geometry node just after the trim curve, and if you try to change the Z value, you can see it rotating. To make it continuously animate, I will click on this and erase everything, then press hashtag frame divided by value 8, and if I enter it, it will animate as well. So basically the rotation value is changing with the frames, and then if the frames are too fast, you can just divide the frame value by 8 so that it slows down. And if we increase the value of division, like I will change it to 40, the rotation speed will slow down. So I find the 8 value sweet spot for this one. One more thing we have to do is, the circle is very small at the start, then becomes really large. For that we can do that as well, which we have the radius of the curved circle. So if we animate it, we can achieve that effect. I go to the first frame. So here what I'm gonna do is change the radius value to 0.2. At this time our curve will be trimming like this. So when it finishes trimming at the 60th frame, what I'm gonna do is increase its size a little bit, like around 0.5 meter. That should be good enough, and make sure to insert a keyframe. Now I forgot to insert a keyframe at the first frame where it should have been a 0.3 meter, and press I to insert a keyframe. Now after some frames, like at the 100th frame, I'm gonna make it grow into the full size, which will be 1 meter, and insert a keyframe again. So with this we will get this kind of animation. Now we are missing one element right here, which is the jiggle effects of our curve. Simply use a set position node just after our curved circle. To make it jiggle, we can use a simple noise texture just like that. Make sure to uncheck the normalize, or the result can be chaotic. Now if we connect this factor to the offset, you will see very bizarre result. We can first of all reduce down its effect using a vector math node, and if we connect in between, then we can change it to scale. This scale will help us reduce down its effect. So if we change around with the scale like that, if we reduce it down, you can see it happening. And if the circle continues to animate, it will give us something this kind of effect. Now what you can also do is reduce down the scale to 1. That should be good enough for us. And now it's jiggling. The quality of the jiggle depends upon the resolution right here. If I change the resolution to 100, the quality will improve, but 50 is good enough. Now with this simple setup, we have got our jiggly curve. Before we go ahead, let's name this to a curve geo backup, and we are gonna keep this one as a backup if something goes wrong ahead. What I'm gonna do is create 2 copies of this right now. I will explain you why. First, let's make 2 copies. Name first one to Sparks, and then second one to our portal. It will get really complicated if we do all of the things on a single object. Let's just hide the backup and then hide the portal for now and work on Sparks. Now before we start working on it, if you go to the modifiers section, here you can see it is already sharing the data with other 2 objects as well. So if you click on this, it will create a separate geo nodes for itself. I will name this one Sparks so that we can easily access it anytime. Now to start with, we would like to have some points on our curve. So we can use a node which is simply called points. If we want to have these points on this curve, we have to use a set position node and connect these points to the geometry. Now for the position, it does not know where is the curve right now, so we have to feed it. We can fetch the exact location of our curve with a simple node which is called sample curve. If we use the sample curve right here, it will fetch the position of our curve right here, as you can see. And if we connect this position not to the position, of course you have to connect it to the offset, and you will see not a single result right now because our set position is not connected to the group output. So let's connect it back again, and you can see the point right here. And we don't want one point, we want like many hundreds and 200s of points. For that, we can change the number to around 400 for now. Even after changing the points to 400, I cannot see the points. They are all at the same position. So how can we make them appear on the separate position of our curve? For that, we are given this factor value. If we change the factor value, you can see it animating on that curve. If we use a random value node, it will give us random value, seriously random values to it. And if we connect back it here, you can see they are all over the curve, our 400 points. Now our next question is like, how do we make them move? That is really simple. We will create a simulation zone. This is really simple to understand. So let's start with just a simple point, like a 1 point. And if we join in right here with a join geometry like that, and then after that use a set position node like this, and then change the Z value to 0.01. Let's connect it back to the group output. And if we go back to the 0th frame and start playing with the spacebar, you can see it is moving, but it is not moving in the Z value. The reason is that we have already rotated our curve on 90 degrees, so that will not work. We have to change the Y value to -0.001, and you will then see this kind of result happening. It is going down. So let's connect back our original 400 points to this joint geometry and then see what happens. If we play, you can see all of them going down like that. So at least we have achieved gravity for these points, but the result doesn't look quite promising. So for example, this is the point right here. It will move 1 unit down like that. It will reach here, then it will again move 1 unit down each and every frame. That is not how gravity works. How a gravity should work is, first it should be moving 1 unit down, then it should slightly increase its range like this, almost 1.5 unit. Then after even more further, it should use like 2 units and so on. The gravity works like that. So to create a fake gravity, what we can do is use a named attribute node like that and a stored named attribute. So what we are gonna do is create a cycle of this offset. So I'm gonna name this O for offset and paste this same to the float value right here. Now our offset value is in vector. You can see with this sign right here, vector. So change this to vector and this one to vector as well. Now this is a really simple setup. As you can see, what is happening is if I connect this attribute back to the offset and this to this as well. So what is happening is we have stored the attribute for our offset going, it is getting stored, then it is going again using this to this offset and then again getting stored again and then repeating like a cycle. But you must be thinking there's no value being stored, there's nothing, it's just these weird looking nodes. And the reason is that we have to add some value just after this. So we will use a vector math node, and if you connect it in between like that, we will get the option to store some values like this. So as we have done before, I'm going to paste the same value here, which is -0.01. And if we play again, we will see different kind of result. As you can see, it looks more like gravity. Now the sparks should not be just going down, they should be going like outwards, then falling down and then going down like that. To get that effect, we have actually something right here which is called tangent. Tangent, if you know, if you have studied math in school, if you have even gone to school, you might know. So tangent is the line that touches at a point on a circle and it is totally straight. So with this tangent, we can throw them outward. Again, that is really simple. Just how we use the store named attribute, we can just duplicate it, bring it back just after the set position, and we can connect this tangent in this value right here. And if we play right now, it is gonna be really chaotic like that. I mean, and that is not what we want, right? The first reason for that, it is really strong right now. So just like how we used a scale vector math node for our noise texture, we can just duplicate this and bring it in between. And if you play now, you can see this kind of result. Now they are going outward a bit, but that is not that powerful. If we change around with the scale, so I'm going to change the scale to 0.2 for now, and then let's see what we get. We are getting that kind of result. Now if you play back again, you can see we still have that kind of problem. At the start, they are kind of creating a pattern, a straight lines that is not looking really good. For that, they have to be randomized. So we can use a random value node. Before we connect it back in, for this max value, I'm gonna copy this value right here and paste it on it. Then for the minimum value, I'm gonna set it to 0.1. And then if we connect it back in, we can see a different result, at least for now. And we have those sparks, just like that. I'm gonna reduce the size of them even further so that we can have a clear look. Now we have a better and clear look towards them. We can still make it even better to break down their similar pattern. What we can do is connect a node which is called scene time and connect the frame to the seed. If you change the seed, you can see them jumping around. That is really crucial to break that pattern and make them totally randomized. And if we see now, you can see they are more randomized than before. We can apply the same thing to the random value we used for the sample curve. We can just duplicate the scene time, but before we connect it back in, I'm gonna use a simple math node like that and connect it to the seed. Then I will connect the frame to the first value, and then I'm gonna add some value like 20 to increase the randomization, and we get this thing at the last. As you can see, they are going way too far. We would like to delete them or erase them from existence. First of all, it looks better, and second, it reduces the load on the system. So that is also really simple. We can just move this simulation a little bit outward, and again we can use a store named attribute like this and a named attribute again. So what we are doing right here is we are going to store a value. Let's use a math node for that. So I'm gonna name this age and paste the same to the named attribute. Now what Blender is gonna do is store a 1 value at every frame. So if I go to the 30th frame, this value is gonna be 30. So how is that helpful for us? For example, a point is summoned at the first frame. So I'm gonna tell the Blender to delete that particular point. How do we tell it to delete? We can use this named attribute, which is age, and then use a compare node like that. Now I'm gonna connect this attribute to the point A. Then I'm gonna tell Blender delete everything that is older than like 10 frames. If we connect it back in, and if we play again, you will see this kind of result. Now anything which is older than 10 frames is getting deleted. As you can see, it was going further than this. Now it is not. Now what we simply have to do at last is replace this point. So using a instance on points, we can replace these points, but for replacing them, we are going to create a spark ourselves. So add a plane to the scene. I'm going to move it up a little bit. The first thing that I'm going to do is scale it on the x-axis like this so that we can make it a long flat spark. Now that we have created this spark, let's just name it as spark as well and go to our geometry nodes. Now we can bring this spark inside here. So for that, what we can do is go to the outliner and drag this inside right here. Now just connect this to the instance right here, and you will see all the sparks inside like that. Right now they look too big, so I'm just gonna scale this down even further and apply the scale. Now they are not looking to a correct direction. So for that, we have the rotation input available. We can fix it with that. We can use our attribute that we created, which is the offset, So offset is like the particular direction these sparks are going towards. We can use this offset, then connect it back to the rotation, but that is not gonna work because this is a vector value and this is a rotation value. We have to use a node which is called align rotation to vector. And if we connect the vector to here and we get the rotation output value and we can connect it back in. And then you can see something weird like this. To get the correct result, we have to switch it to Y and we get the correct result like that. But the problem for our first problem right here would be that our plane will only be visible from one direction. They will be flat from the other. So for example, let's just quickly apply a texture on this and let's me show you how it looks. So I'm selecting this. I'm gonna divide this panel here and go to the shader editor and I will click a new and let's name this spark for the texture as well. Make sure you are doing it to this plane. By default, we will have this principal be STF. We will get rid of this. What we want is a transparent and a emission one like this. Then we can connect them back together with a mix shader. Now we have to define like where we want it to be transparent. So what we actually want is, for example, it should be looking something like this and the inside will be colored and the outside will be transparent. So to achieve that, we will use first a UV map and we already have a UV of our plane, so we can use that. Then if we drag this out and connect it to a separate XYZ like that, we'll get the X, Y and Z. Now if you visualize it by pressing Ctrl Shift left click on this and change to the material preview, you can see there's a gradient from the left, and for the Y you can see gradient from this side. How we can use is drag the X out, use a color ramp like that. Now with this, as you can already see, is there is a black which is this one and the white part is this one. So what we can do is add another one in between. This one is going to be in the middle, which will be our white, so I'm going to make it totally white. And the right one, which is at the end, I'm going to make this black because the black parts are going to be the transparent ones. Now we have this kind of effect. We can change it to ease. That is going to make it even better. Now I'm going to duplicate this color ramp right here and connect the Y value to it as well. And if we have a look at it, you can see it has created a gradient from this side and this side, and we have white in between. Now if we combine both of them using a math, and if we connect them both like this and just visualize it, we don't see a good result because we have to change this to the multiply, and we then have this kind of result which looks really good. And then we can definitely plug it to the factor, and this factor is what is gonna do is make the black part transparent and the emission part will be the in between. For the emission, I'll change the color to something like that. That should be good enough. And to make it look better, what I can do is use a color ramp again just after this, and we can just sharpen it. Then duplicate this color ramp again and connect it to the color input. Make sure to connect the multiply output to the color ramp as well. So this way we can make an outline of our emission. So this is kind of the gradient I have set it, and it looks like this. I'm going to change the emission strength to 5. Now as you can see, it is looking ugly. Don't worry about it. Now you can see it is only visual from one direction. To make it visible from the all direction, go to the edit mode of this by pressing the tab, shift duplicate this, right click to reset it to original position, then rotate it on the Y direction. We'll make it look like a crisscross. It should be rotated by 90 degrees, and that should be good enough for it. So the first thing that we can fix is we can again use this attribute of our offset and then connect a vector math node which is a length, and then we can connect it back into the scale right here, and we see that they are better in size than before. So our spark should not be like this. This should be like this. That we can do is by just editing our original spark right here. So I'm gonna go to edit mode, and if I select and scale these vertices, what happens to our original spark? The head is getting shorter. That is not what we want. So select the opposite side and then scale it, and it will make the sparks sharper at the end like that. And then I'm gonna add edge loop like that in between, and with this I'm gonna move it to the ahead like that. and you can see the sparks are looking more sparkier. To make the scene look even better, what you can do is shift to the renderer view and change our renderer to cycles and GPU compute. Now it should be looking something like this, which is better than before at least, but we can fix it even further. So I'm going to change this material shader editor to a compositor and click on use nodes. That will help us enable this node setup. To view what is actually happening, go to this drop down and change the compositor to always, that we can see what we are compositing. And we will just use a simple node which is clear, and that will change everything for us, just like that. You can change around with the result. I'm going to set it to bloom for now, and you can see the result has become so beautiful. Also, to have a proper look, what I'm going to do is go to the wall properties and change the strength of our HDRI to 0, and it is going to be all black. We will be able to see a proper result than before. You can adjust around with the settings. For example, if you can enable the spark again, what I can do is again stretch it out like that, so that you can make the sparks even more longer. You can make it thinner as well, so that sparks become more sharper as well, and you get this kind of result, and that is actually looking really better than before, I would say. Now we can move towards our next step, where we are going to create that see-through effect of our portal of a different place. So we can hide those sparks for now and enable our original portal right here, which is this one. And for that magical step, first we have to fill this with a mesh, so it has a face and we can apply that material on it. So using a fill curve node, we can just fill it with some geometry. Now before we can apply the material, we have to first make another portal just like this. So what we have to do is add another modifier on top of it and create a new. I will name this one to sparks. And now here we have this. Now to start with, what we are going to do is tell Blender, hey, for example, let's use this empty, which is a sphere right here, as you can see. So I'll tell Blender, hey, use this empty sphere and place another portal to this position. How can we do that? So here in the geometry right here, I'm going to use a node which is geometry to instance. It will convert our geometry into an instance, and that is the only way this effect is gonna work. So make sure you are using this before it. I will make a duplicate using this, and I will use a store named attribute and connect it back in using a join geometry node, and we have a duplicate, but it is at the same position. As I said, I'm going to use the location, rotation and scale of this object to set the position of that second portal. We can use just a normal object info node and plug this out to this geometry input, and we get the option to select the object of whichever object we want to copy the location. So I will select this empty so that we can set the duplicated portal to this position, and it always follows it. So for that, we will have to combine the transforms of our object info. So I'll connect the location to the translation, rotation to the rotation, scale to the scale. Now after this, before we connect this to this one, we have to change the data type to 4x4 matrix. Point will be changed to instance, and then we can connect it back in. Now nothing is gonna happen. The reason for that is really simple, because we have to enter a value here. If we click on it, we'll get a drop down, and you have to just select this instant transform. As you can see, it is copying the position. Now one issue is here, if you move this empty, it is like following it really weirdly. The reason is that you have to set it to relative, and after setting it to relative, it has rotated like that. The reason is that we have rotated our original mesh by 90 degree, so it is not following properly. So we can just again rotate it 90 degree like that, and we have it perfectly, and it will follow it everywhere, rotate it any angle. Now after we are done with this magical step, the next step in our this is to store some data, which we can do with the store named attribute. What we need to store is the location, changes to vector, and make sure this is on instance. Then only the data can be stored properly. Now I can duplicate this one and name this one to rotation, and last one will be our scale. And we have to store these 3 values, but there's a trick to storing all these 3 values. So let's just connect it out, connect it to our object info like that, and then we can again use the combine transform to combine the transform location, rotation and scale like that. After this, we have to fetch the data of our original object. So we can use a self object, which is our portal. We can connect it here and make sure they are set to original. don't set them to relative. Now duplicate this, connect the location, rotation, scale, and after this what we simply have to do is combine them using a multiply matrices and combine them. But one thing we have to make sure is before combining this one, the self object, you have to invert the matrices. And now we cannot combine this to this locations, rotation, scale because we have to separate those transformation using the separate transform. Then we can store the location, rotation, and lastly the scale. Similarly, we have to do for the empty one as well, where the duplicate portal is. We can connect it to this and connect it back and cut the previous one. Now to store it, we can just simply again duplicate these 3 nodes right here, but this time we cannot connect them in the same manner. We have to connect them to the opposite one. So like that, if you connect them to the opposite one and then again store them, we will have our final data with us. Now after all this bullshit is done, you have to use a set material just after them, and I will create a new material which will be called portal and just use the same portal material here as well. Now we can move to the shader editor where we are going to create that really nice portal material. Let's get rid of this principal BSDF. We will have a new material that is called ray portal BSDF. Now before we can get started working on this, we want to change it to the material or the render view for now. And now that we can have a proper look on it, so I'm going to add some objects in our scene. As you can see, I can search here for some object, which is a blender kit. Link is in the description. I'm going to use this terrain and it looks amazing. And also let's just add some HDRI for our scene as well. So I'm going to add basically this one. So we can have something like this. So I'm going to keep it something like this and get rid of this plane. Now this is our portal right here, as you can see, and we can't see anything through it with this ray portal BSDF. So it requires us to give it a position and a direction. So let's understand how are we going to achieve that. So first of all, we have the ability to use a node which is called geometry node. With this, we can use this incoming and connect it to the direction. And you can see something weird is happening. Make sure you are into cycles or else you will not be able to see any result. As you can see, something is happening for now. To change around the result, we can use a vector match node just in between, change it to scale, and I'll set it to -1, and that will turn around the result. So what does incoming do? Let's understand it properly. So instead of ray portal BSDF, I'm going to use a emission right here and connect the data to it. And let's connect it back to the material output. Now you can see I'm able to see the colors changing. I'll create a fake camera right here, and the camera is like looking towards it. So whatever light is getting reflected on it and is going towards the camera, these are the incomings which we are using in the geometry right here. So these incomings always keep on rotating depending upon the position of camera. So that indicates that these incomings are rotating as well. We are using these incomings and we have inverted them, and we are using this as a direction. Now section is we have to give it the position. That is also simple. We have the position right here. We can feed it in and we don't get any result. Let's do the same trick of using a vector math node right here, change it to add, and I'm gonna scale it down as well to something of a -0.001 for now. Connect it here, use the normal value for this one. We have not defined it the exact location, rotation, and scale of our original object. We have to define it that. For the direction, we have to only add the rotation. So to add that, we can use a vector rotate like this, and then we can bring in the data we stored. As you remember, we have stored the rotation, location, rotation, and scale in our geometry node. We can access them right here with a node which is called attribute node. And then before we connect it in, we change this to EULAR because rotation value is needed, and we can connect this vector right back in. And we have to select the rotation value, which is right here. We have to type in the same alphabets or else it is not gonna work. Now the second thing that you have to make sure is change this to an instancer. So as you remember, we have stored every data as an instance. With this done, we should be able to see something happening. For example, if I rotate this, you can see something happening on the left portal, which is portal 1. It is still not perfect because we have to still fix it. So we have to combine the other attributes as well. So let's just duplicate this. I'll have it like this, then duplicate this and change this to scale. Duplicate another one and change this one to location. Combine the scale. I'm gonna duplicate this add node, change it to multiply, and then I can connect it back using this one. So for combining the rotate, we will need the same vector rotate like this again, and then I can just connect it to the rotation. And lastly, for the location, we can just use a simple add node like this and then add the location to it as well. Now we are perfectly able to see everything which is in our opposite direction. To have a better understanding, let's add a monkey to our scene and let's just scale it down. I'm going to move it toward that side. As you can see, we are able to see the back of our monkey. Now that we have the portal, we can turn back our sparks again. Let's enable them again. Let's go to the search and we have the portal plus the sparks. But our first problem right here is the sparks are only appearing on this one. They are not appearing on the second one. To fix that problem, that is really simple. So just how we created a duplicate geometry node on our portal modifiers, we can do the same for our sparks. So let's create another geometry node, but we are not going to do everything from scratch. Let's just select the same portal modifier we made. Now before making any changes to it, as you already know, this data is already being used by the portal. So we have to make a unique copy of it and I will name this sparks02. Now we just have to select the object, which is again the empty, and the sparks are at that position. But before we play it, we don't need to store any of these data. So I will just get rid of them. So let's just get rid of all of this data and connect it back in. And now if we play from the start, we will have this kind of result. The next problem right here is, as you can see, the transition of our portal is not very smooth. It's just looking very jagged. So we can fix that as well. So let's head back to the shader editor where we created all of this stuff. So what we are simply going to do is we're going to use another node which is called transparent BSDF. Combine them using a mix shader. Just like that, combine them together. Now we can control how much we want the transparent one and how much we want the portal. So the easiest way you can animate it is just going at the 50th frame where the circle is about to form. Sure it is at the 0 and insert keyframe. Then go a little bit ahead, like at the 70th frame. That should be good enough. All the way to the 1 and press I and insert a keyframe. And if we play the result now, we will have this kind of result. The next thing is we can freely move the second portal, but we cannot freely move the first portal. For that, what we can do is add another empty to our scene. And after that, select the portal and then go to the constraints tab. And here inside, add a new constraint, which is child off. And in child, I'll select the empty 001 that we just added. And same, you have to do it for the sparks as well. I've done it already, as you can see. Now, if you move the empty, everything will fall right perfectly. With this, guys, this tutorial comes to an end. This portal, it will be available on my Gumroad page. This would be a little bit advanced with a little bit more feature, more controllability. So you have to just use it and drag and drop and start using it. Also, if this tutorial was really helpful and you really loved watching this tutorial, please give a thumbs up. And also, if you have any doubts, please do drop them in the comment section and I will help you out as soon as possible. So, thanks for watching and I will see you guys in the next tutorial.